Well, praise the Lord, everyone, and welcome to our session on hybrid worship and using technology for discipleship during a global pandemic. I am Dr. Wendy Knox Cotton, and I am here with Reverend Timothy Farmer, my colleague who agreed to come and share with us his some of his expertise. We both share some skill sets in terms of instructional technology, and we are both veteran educators. However, Reverend Farmer also has some expertise as he is the media director for one of our larger churches in the metro Atlanta area. So he's going to share some things with us. I want you to know that this is a pre recorded session. Because of his schedule, he could not be with us live. So, what we're going to do is just have a conversation about how to use technology for discipleship and for ministry. And so, yeah. So let's just jump right into it. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about Reverend Farmer. You'll see his bio during the live session, but just want to brag on him a little bit. Reverend Farmer is a graduate of Morehouse College, the Morehouse College, and we know we have several Morehouse alums in our fellowship, Apostle Norwood and Mark Norwood, Minister Mark, and Marshall Norwood, and of course, I've got several Morehouse men in my family. So my mom's brothers and brothers-in-law. So he got his undergraduate degree in elementary education from Morehouse College. And you correct me if I missed something, Reverend Farmer. And then he went on to get his Master's of Divinity from the Interdenominational Theological Center, which is also a part of our Atlanta University Center. And he is currently, uh, you have a master's degree in instructional technology too, right?
And curriculum and instruction, I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I do.
So I should have had my notes in front of
No,
me, but I
that's
don't.
okay. No, I'm
Okay.
honored that
Uh,
you even introduced me with all of, especially with Morehouse. I mean, you can't go
I
wrong with
know,
that.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
Dear old Morehouse.
Jerome Morehouse.
But Reverend Farmer is also a candidate for the Doctor of Ministry degree from the Candler School of Theology at Emory University. So he will be concluding that in 2022, in the spring of 2022. So he
Yes.
is an ordained minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So he's prepared to speak to us from a ministry standpoint as well as from a technology standpoint, as is his vocation. So, with that said, let me introduce you to Reverend Timothy Farmer. We're going to start off talking about hybrid ministry. And so that's actually in the if you look at on the flyer, it talks about hybrid ministry, and that's a word. Hybrid is a word that has become quite commonplace
Hmm.
since COVID, right?
Yes.
We're many of us work from home.
Hmm.
Um, we teleworked for several months, over a year. We did in our school district, and then we went back into the school buildings, but some of our students were not, and so that created a hybrid platform
Hmm.
where our teachers had to learn how to accommodate what we've coined the phrase, the terms roomies and zoomies. So
Hmm.
we had to learn, our teachers had to learn how to accommodate their roomies, which were the students who were present with them, at the same time as teaching their zoomies. And those were the students whose parents were not quite comfortable enough sending them back into a face to face learning environment. So they were still learning virtually. And we had no idea how commonplace that would become, and how that would kind of permeate into our worship space. So, Reverend Farmer, talk to us about what hybrid ministry is and why it's so critical to have a hybrid ministry.
Certainly. And I've used the term or the phrase hybrid ministry, as many of us have heard of hybrid worship.
Mm-hmm.
However, worship is just one aspect of ministry. And so there are several components of who we are as a church that, in addition to worship, are a part of who we are as in our congregations, that which we do from a Monday through Saturday to ultimately
Mm-hmm.
lead to our worship experience. And to your point, when we transition to working virtually and then back into the physical space, even from a school perspective, it's conducive for what we do to be able to accommodate both those who are in our physical presence and
Mm-hmm.
those who are learning at home. We call them roomies and zoomies in the school
Mm-hmm.
setting. From the church perspective, I call them the
Mm-hmm.
visuals and the virtuals. So you
Okay.
have the
Okay.
visuals in person and then the virtuals who are online. And
Okay.
so, and being able to accommodate both and do so in a simultaneous manner is something that is what I consider to be a critical skill that from the pulpit must be acquired in terms of preaching to both environments, and then even from an outreach discipleship, being able to accommodate both environments. And no matter what size your church is, whether you're a
Mm-hmm.
small church, as I'm imagining, there are those who are at the point of having a robust media ministry as well as those
Mm-hmm.
who are just getting off the ground. But no
Mm-hmm.
matter where you are, the technology is just one piece, but it's the skill of being able to connect both in one
Mm-hmm.
space at the same time and being able to make both audiences feel as though they are part of the ministry and the vision of the
Mm.
church is what, as we move even beyond the COVID space, that we must, because I'm sure many of us have learned that being able to have the virtual environment is something that we're not going to do without anymore. It's going to be a
Right.
critical component as a
Mm-hmm.
part of who we are
Mm-hmm.
as a church.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so with that in mind, in technology or a hybrid ministry is nothing new in the church, because even Jesus' ministry had a virtual component, because most of his connections with people, there was both
Mm-hmm.
those who he connected with in the church or in the synagogue, but the majority of it was outside of the synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that in mind, virtual ministry and
Mm-hmm.
technology is really nothing new, but now we see it in a place where, unlike in our ministries before, we're, I won't say forced, but we are in a space where technology is no longer on the back burner, but it's the hottest eye on the stove.
It is.
Yeah.
As it is, as we see, in our vocation,
Hmm.
in our jobs, where people may have been reluctant to use technology before for teaching and learning. Now they don't have a choice. COVID forced them into it.
Hmm.
And in many similarities, COVID has forced the church into this space that is unfamiliar. We're growing into it, but it is forcing us to reach out to people in ways that we were maybe not as comfortable doing before.
Hmm.
Um, the scriptures tell us to go out into the highways and the byways
Hmm.
and to compel men to come to Christ.
Hmm.
Well, how do we compel men to come to Christ? Men and women, that is,
Mhm, mhm,
how do we do that?
mhm,
Back in the old days, I was sharing with you, I say the old days, but back when I was coming up, um, growing up at Bible Way in the Thomasville community of Atlanta, Georgia, we would go out into the community on Saturdays,
mhm,
and we would
mhm,
pass out tracts. We would go into the apartment complex complexes, and we would knock on doors of homes, and we would go downtown
Mhm.
even and stop people we never knew and would give them a track and say, can I tell you about Jesus Christ? Do you,
Mhm.
let me tell you about the plan of salvation. And we were trained to do that from little children,
Mhm.
going up. So that was one way of going out into the highways and the byways. That was pre-internet.
Mhm.
We had
Mhm.
television, but you had to kind of be wealthy to be on television,
Right. Right. There were
before
only
that
so many in
had
the house, and
commercial. Right.
yeah, yeah.
So that's how we had to go bring men and women and boys and girls into our fellowships, who would not ordinarily, happen upon our ministries. Now we've got different tools to use,
Mhm.
and so here we are, in the midst of COVID, still, navigating these waters,
Mhm.
um, but trying to adapt our ministries, um, to understand that, media ministry and social media,
Mhm.
and video ministry, it's now, like, I think it's a permanent part, at least in our lifetime. And so can you speak to that part
Sure.
about why this is critical post COVID?
Mhm. So it's critical post COVID because now, even for those who your ministries, you may have just started to, let's say, stream your service on Facebook or go live on Facebook. There have been people who have learned about your ministry who otherwise, before doing so, would have
Hmm.
never heard of your church. And they may have
Hmm.
heard of it
Hmm.
from your live that someone who's a member of your church might have shared on
Hmm.
their timeline, or they may have just been scrolling on their cell phone and saw your ministry come up, and there was something that was said that compelled them to watch. And we'll talk more about how to make what you say and how the worship service unfolds to be
Hmm. Hmm.
compelling, to make more people
Okay.
watch longer. But by virtue of that fact of what people saw from viewing your service, even if it was a Zoom, it was streamed
Hmm.
from a Zoom call.
Hmm.
Now there are people who are connected with your ministry who have never set foot in your church, who have
Hmm.
never driven by the building, who are connected. And so that
Hmm.
is a soul that ultimately
Hmm.
we have to disciple in some way or another. And so, and it is our goal to, as the Great Commission tells us, to
Hmm.
uh, bring disciples and to make disciples for Christ.
Hmm.
And so that's the
Hmm.
sole purpose of the church, is to
Right.
make disciples. And so
Hmm.
in doing so, if we don't continue in that vein, whether again, if you are at the beginning or you don't have anything in place
Hmm.
technologically, is to at least have the mindset of, even if we don't have the team or we are at ground zero, that this is something that needs to be on the forefront of your ministry in order to ultimately fulfill the Great Commission. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
'cause can you imagine being, one of the 12 disciples, and the Great Commission is placed upon you to make disciples, but yet you're just 12 and there's the entire world.
Hmm.
And so now
Hmm.
we have the tools to where
Hmm.
the 12 were limited in transportation. They were
Right.
limited in capacity to reach more than the people that were in their region. Now we are the generation that
Hmm.
has the ability, with a click of a button, to reach people across the world by clicking
Right.
live. And
Right.
so that's how critical it is when you click live on your
Uh-huh.
device, whether it be a studio or whether it be just a cell phone on a tripod.
Uh-huh.
By doing so, you have the means by which to impact the entire world. And that's how critical it is.
I could not have said that better.
Mhm.
So Reverend Farmer, let's talk technology basics. Um, what are some of the things, so we, the churches in the Church of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is our governing body, our international church organization, And then we're broken down to 12 regions, like the
Mhm.
12 apostles.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so this region that we are in is Region 7. That's Georgia and Alabama, and it also includes some foreign nations, as Apostle Norwood is the apostle of foreign missions or global missions, as he has been for many, many years. So it does include some foreign nations, but this is Region 7, and the churches in our region run the gamut from being the size of Bible Way and much larger, uh, to maybe 30 members,
Mhm.
20 members,
Mhm.
50 members, 100 members. And so we had, and their budgets probably go according to, the church, uh, the membership size. And so let's talk to us about what the church can do who has nothing, or they're starting with nothing or very little.
Mhm.
Like, for instance, I've seen just scrolling by, during the height of the pandemic when nobody was going anywhere, and all of your worship was virtual. So I would watch Bible Way, and then I would watch a few other churches, and I would just, I may catch several services.
Mhm.
Sean, my husband, my dad, and I, we'd be sitting here, and we sit on the sofa or at
Y'all
the
church
picnic
hopping.
table. Right. We just we would be church hopping.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
We catch some of everybody. I see, Bishop Connolly Hill in Anniston, Alabama, and
Mhm.
District Elder Carr in Alabama, and I'd see District Elder Anthony Prince in Augusta, Georgia. Just different ministries.
Mhm.
We were able to just, and it would be basically by Facebook. And some of them I could tell, like it may be, the pastor's wife with her iPhone, you know, recording and streaming live from her phone, um, to Facebook. But it was what they had, and
Mhm.
it was helpful to
Mhm.
be able to reach other people. So, what can we talk to us about some of the basics you need for a media ministry, um, and then how we can develop on a budget, and maybe even going from that to creating a team when you may have several people to choose from, uh, or you may not have
Mhm.
many people to choose from, and it may be a situation where one or two people in your ministry wear several hats. And
Mhm.
so I know I've given you a lot, but start with the internet, and what are some of the basic equipment you need, and we'll go
Sure.
from there.
Sure. Sure. So
Mhm.
just some of the basics without getting too deep into the technicalities of
Mhm.
things. But certainly, if you are looking to stream live in your worship space, is having a good bandwidth of internet. And when I say good, what that means is being able to have streaming that is smooth, that doesn't buffer, that doesn't become interrupted.
Mhm.
And I know with the varying churches who are watching this broadcast, there may be some who are in rural environments where the
Mhm.
internet options are limited. But
Mhm.
at least making the first step of reaching out to your internet provider to identify if we're getting the best bandwidth that we can, and if not, what are the options to increase that bandwidth to be able to stream. And so the question is, can we
Mhm.
get internet that will allow us to stream our worship service? That's the question to ask if you aren't getting or don't have internet service
Right.
in the worship space to be able to do that. And
Mhm.
so that's the foundational thing, is internet, because not only for streaming but for other things such as being able to connect laptops or mobile devices
Mhm.
that will be used to
Mhm.
monitor the chat for
Mhm.
Facebook or for YouTube, things of that nature. So certainly a basic internet plan that allows for quality streaming.
Okay.
And so for ministries who aren't streaming live or doing anything yet, but they want to get started. And as you mentioned, there are several who are using mobile devices,
Mhm.
iPhones, and
Mhm.
really to get started, a mobile device is really all you need.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you are in a space or in a location that has pretty good cellular data, you can go live on Facebook pretty easily just by
Right.
using a tripod with an iPhone adapter or an Android adapter and putting that device on that tripod and then going live. Now, it certainly enhances that broadcast if you can connect that mobile device to a wireless or a Wi-Fi internet connection. But even if not, then cellular data should, if you're in a metropolitan area that has pretty good cellular data, you should be able to make it
Mhm.
work from there.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so that's certainly foundational. Uh,
Mhm.
there are some extensions to that. To if your space has limited lighting, things such as a ring light to help
Mhm.
enhance the lighting of that space, to start from there. And then you can graduate to things such as multi cameras or being able to incorporate the audio from your soundboard into the stream. But at the very basics, being able to have internet and some type of mobile device, a phone or a tablet to be able to go live on Facebook.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, talk to us about how do you develop technology budget? And so I'm asking you this question because I know that on our live session, there are going to be several pastors there and deacons and other people who control the purse strings, so to speak, of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always budget conscious of how are we spending our money, and is it an effective use of our money? And so what can a smaller church or a church with a small budget expect to spend to have uh, a media ministry that you can't tell it's a small budget
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at it. That's the key,
Mm-hmm.
because technology allows us to do so much now. Like you said, if you have an iPhone or an Android, and that's all you have, then you can use what you have. And there's software, and there are different tools and different things that you can use to make that look like it's that you have a bigger budget than you actually do. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
talk to us about that part.
certainly. So
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that you don't have to be a large ministry to
Hmm.
be a first class ministry.
Right.
And there, to your point, there are ways to
Hmm.
make your broadcast look polished, look
Hmm.
professional,
Hmm.
and have a look that would make a person, as they are swiping, to pause instead
Right.
of continuing to swipe, to look
Right.
at your broadcast.
Right.
And so some of the basics around that to give a professional look beyond going from the iPhone, and this can be done on an iPhone, but just the
Hmm.
basic stream, just the video feed, is to be able to incorporate things such as some modest graphics that can be
Hmm.
added to the broadcast, and and that could be in the form of a flyer that shows the ways to give.
Hmm.
That can also be in the format of what we call in video production lower thirds, such as the ones you see below us with our
Hmm.
names,
Hmm.
to be able to
Hmm.
show the sermon title, the
Hmm.
sermon text, sermon points, or if you want to show words to hymns, things of that nature. That
Right.
can be done with a basic software that can be operated through a mobile app on an iPhone or an Android.
Hmm.
And that is called, and this is one I recommend to many churches getting started, is Switcher Studio. And
Okay.
Switcher Studio, and the website is switcherstudio.com. Pretty
Okay.
much, it is an app that you can download. And when you go live, you will go live through the app, and it will then broadcast on Facebook. But the difference from just going live on Facebook and then using the app, in the app, you can add your logo, you can add
Got it.
your
Got
uh,
it.
backgrounds and things of that
Okay.
nature. Yeah. And so to your question about what can ministries, small ministries, expect to spend
Uh-huh.
to get themselves from maybe just starting to the next level.
Uh-huh.
So I would say, and it may depend based on what additional things that a ministry might want to do, but as they are planning their budgets, and if for many churches, this is their budget planning season in preparation for
Mm-hmm.
next year,
Mm-hmm.
which I would recommend that as a part of your budget planning going
Mm-hmm.
forward, that you
Yes.
incorporate a technology line item.
Mm-hmm.
But just to get started, I would say if I were to give a number to it, I would say try to set aside, let's say $750 to $1,000, or,
Okay.
or I would say 500 to 1,000. So,
Okay.
and the reason why I say that, Switcher Studio is about $45 a month. So that puts you in that range on the lower end. And then if there's a
Mm-hmm.
need for a tripod, then so, and maybe a wire or two. So I just use
Mm-hmm.
that as some wiggle room to be able to
Okay.
have an idea. Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
All
Yeah.
right. Can
So
can they do it for under five?
they could do it for under five. So if,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, with Switcher Studio, then you can, if let's say, start off with just paying the monthly amount. So it's $45. And if you uh, try it and you see that it works and it helps to make your ministry look more professional,
Mm-hmm.
then take it 1 month at a time. And then go from there if you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to add graphics to your broadcast to give it a more
Got
professional
it.
look.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, and while Reverend Farmer is talking about these, we're doing sort of a general um, conversation about technology and using technology for discipleship and worship. But what we have in mind going forward is to once this is over and we're able to speak with Apostle Norwood and District Elder Carr about some other things, that we want to give pastors time to identify some people in your ministry, one, two, three people who could be responsible for moving your media ministry forward. And then Reverend Farmer and I want to come back and have a series of workshops with those individuals so that we can drill down and talk specifics about this is what you need, this is how you do it, and demonstrate some of those things to help move them forward. So I just wanted to put that out there before we go on to our next. So talk to us about worship planning and streaming do's and don'ts.
Mhm.
What can we do? What would you recommend in terms of worship planning? Now, I will say this: I know for a fact that at Bible Way, which is my home church, I know that Brother Calvin Thorborn III is is a is is an excellent media director. He and Minister Mark Norwood, they do a lot in terms of planning for the worship. And I've seen that in action. I've been a part of it. Um, so I know that they understand. You may be able to give them some tips that perhaps they haven't thought of. But we're thinking of, everybody in the region, and we want this to go to everybody, and perhaps everybody can get something from it to understand the importance of worship planning and perhaps how you can make that happen.
Certainly. So with worship planning, as it relates to,
May I stop you for a
yes,
moment? I
sure,
just had I just had a thought.
okay,
And I say this because if I take it back to the old days, when we knew what we were going to sing on Sunday morning, but worship planning looked it may have been very minimal, especially in the evening worship services. There was testimony service,
Mhm,
and you'd
mhm,
have,
mhm, mhm,
a few people at the altar,
mhm.
and we start out singing a song, and there was no thought given to what you were going to sing. You just got up and you were led by the Spirit about
Sure.
about what you were going to sing and who was going to testify, and it just went on until it was time to move to the next part of the service. Well, that's just not the era that we live in now, and so I just had that
Oh,
thought,
yes.
when we're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about worship planning, because we live in an era now where we probably need to plan,
Mhm.
not just what the choir is going to sing, but all of the components that are necessary for worship. And in many ways, it is a production. It may not sound
Yeah.
very spiritual to say
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
but it is a production. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a
No,
bad thing.
no, no.
So, Reverend Farmer, I'll let you talk and answer that.
Oh, no, I mean, I can recall those days as
Right,
well of,
right.
all of the different services, and
Hmm.
there was no script per se. They just had a
Right.
typical way of which they
Hmm.
unfolded. And
Right.
so those were the days when Sunday, the margin of which Sunday had for everybody who were churchgoers was much wider than
Yes, it
what it is
was.
now.
Yes, it
So
was.
Sunday has to compete with a lot of
It
things that
does.
go on.
It
So,
does.
and
Hmm.
if the truth be told, I know all of us
Hmm.
we are spiritual people and we like to
Hmm.
stay at church, but in the back of our minds, we're thinking, okay, I wonder how the Falcons are doing today.
I'm telling you that is real in the Cotton House. That is real in the Knox house.
Yes,
And
yes.
and my dad was the chairman of deacon for many years, but the Braves come
Hmm.
on, and he's been a Braves fan my
Uh-huh.
whole life,
Yeah.
so he knows what time they're coming on, who they're playing, and he's just one of many people. They're all thinking about
Yeah.
other things that are on
Mhm.
the agenda
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
day, even if it's just what are we eating today?
What are we
Wonder
eating?
what mama
Yeah.
cooked, or what
Yes.
my
Yes.
wife cooked,
Right.
or
If my greens
or
are still
whoever.
simmering
Right,
on low.
right,
Yes.
right, right,
Uh-huh.
right,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then in addition to that, as we work to attract younger
right.
families and the millennial population, not only
Right.
for themselves professionally, they're more connected to their jobs via email. Even
Hmm.
if they work 9 to 5, there's still the connection to the job
No
after.
such thing as 9 to 5 in
No such
many
thing as
systems.
that. And
Mm-mm.
then those same millennials have children who now are involved in sporting
Hmm.
activities and
Right.
dance classes and
That is
all of
very
those.
true.
So all of
Hmm.
that used to be taboo on a Sunday, now 7 days a week, there are opportunities for those
Right.
types of involvement.
Right.
So with that being said, the worship has to not conform per se to that, but it has to be accommodating to the lifestyles
Hmm.
of just how life
Hmm.
is now in order
Right.
to continue to keep them engaged. And so, with that being the case, worship has to be designed in a way that will not only keep them connected, but
Hmm.
keep them engaged and make them feel as though this is a valuable
Right.
experience for me.
Right.
And so, one of the things that must be considered as a part of worship planning, even in this space and beyond, now as we have more of a virtual audience or even a hybrid ministry, is that what our worship service was like in the predominantly physical space cannot
Hmm.
be the same way that it goes forth
Hmm.
in this space and beyond COVID-19. And when I say that, I
Hmm.
mean, we were and I grew up in the Baptist church. You
Hmm.
started off with devotional
Hmm.
service, then you led into the doxology, then you led
Hmm.
into uh, the scripture reading, the
Hmm.
altar prayer, then the choir
Hmm.
singing, and so that
Hmm.
the front part of the service was a pretty lengthy period of time, and
Yes, sir.
so. But by
Yes,
virtue
sir.
of you already being at the church, you weren't just gonna get up and leave, and because
Right.
you were bored, you just tuned out and you played tic-tac-toe or you wrote on
Mm-hmm.
the bulletin. And so, but now with people viewing from their respective places, if they're at the baseball game or if they're um, and if all of that might be going on, you will have the likelihood of losing people. So
Mm-hmm.
just taking into consideration
Mm-hmm.
how efficient, and efficient doesn't necessarily mean short, but
Right.
efficient means how you're maximizing the time of that service to keep them engaged. And
Okay.
that's not going to always, in most cases, look like how it was before the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah. And so some ways to do that is, one, if you are streaming as of now, if you are on Facebook, Facebook provides a way in their data to know how long people are watching your service and when they are
Mm.
actually logging on. And so, and it's interesting because just like how in the physical church, people knew around what time to get to church
Just
just to miss Deacon so and so's long prayer on his knee to get to when the choir was going to sing.
right, right, right.
So, and just like in the virtual space, you can pretty much see
You
the
can.
trends of
You
where
can.
people are going. Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting point. So, the scriptures also say that he that winneth souls is wise.
Hmm. Hmm.
And with that comes the responsibility of being able to analyze data like that. And that's not something that we have thought about before. Um, you remember, coming up in Sunday school, they would have this board up that had the numbers of
The attendance. Yes,
how
yes,
many
yes.
attended, and
The
what the
offering.
offering was, right?
Yes.
All of
Oh,
that
you telling your
stuff.
age now, Wendy. You telling your
Right.
age.
Hey, I'm telling yours too.
Yeah. Yes.
You look for that stuff,
Hmm. Hmm.
but at any rate, that my point is that was data.
That was data.
Okay, that was data. It wasn't on a computer, but it was data. Now we have the ability to look at statistics and numbers in a different way. And I mean, it may not sound all that churchy or all that spiritual. You're not going to speak in tongues over looking at the stats from
Right.
Facebook.
Right.
But if you want to know if you're being effective in your ministry on Facebook, you might want to go ahead and look at that data and see, well, when are people tuning in? And I think I don't know if it was you or someone was telling me about people's attention span
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
when they're online.
Yes.
Um, it's not that long.
It's not that long. I mean,
Yeah,
because with in the world of Instagram and TikTok and all of those
right.
social media
Hmm.
platforms that have 30-second videos, so
Hmm.
you run into that same scenario when it comes
Hmm.
to online worship, that
Right.
you have 30 seconds in many cases to grab their attention.
Hmm.
So how can you
How
maximize
can you do that?
every moment of your worship service? And so some of the best practices around that is, if you are looking to engage people, and again, this comes with using a platform like a Switcher Studio to incorporate some pictures at the beginning
Hmm.
of your service that shows your ministry in actions, outreach
Hmm.
opportunities, even your worship, what that looks like in person, so people get a sense of who you are as a church, not
Hmm.
just within the worship space, but just who your
Right.
church is as a whole.
Right.
Also, if you are looking to, if you're wanting to share information about your church announcements, things of that nature, the very beginning isn't the necessarily always. If you do it at the beginning,
Hmm.
it's good,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
there's also a factor is that you hook them in. So if you do show announcements or pictures, show them at the beginning, but then
Hmm.
follow up with that in the middle of the service. So you have a hook at the
Hmm.
beginning, and then you have a second hook to keep them grabbed in
Hmm.
right before,
Like
let's say, the offering or before the sermon. So,
hmm
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a production.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
production.
Yeah.
Um, but anybody can do it though. It's,
Sure.
it's not difficult to do. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm looking at the time and our conversation. Man, we still got some more things to talk about. So
Yeah.
let's talk about now. This is going to get every pastor on here and every deacon on here. Their antenna is about to go up when I mention this. Talk about how we can use technology for to increase our giving.
Mhm.
What are
Mhm.
there are ways, and I will say this. Well, I'll let you talk first, and then I'll come back. I'll interject later.
Certainly. So
Hmm.
I would say online giving or electronic means of giving has increased in the churches that I've been blessed to support significantly, from small churches to
Hmm.
large churches,
Hmm.
going from an average of about, before the pandemic, maybe those who were using it before, from about 15%, maybe 20%, to about 60 to 70%
Hmm.
of their giving, and not just
Hmm.
keeping or at the same amount as far as what they were accustomed to giving, but it actually increased, in addition
Hmm.
to it being the majority of the means of which people gave,
Hmm.
because they're connecting again with more people. So a person who has never connected or never been a part of that
Hmm.
ministry, watching and decides to support that ministry. And
Hmm.
so one of the ways that has been effective for many churches is through one of my favorite online giving tools, and the easiest to incorporate is
Hmm.
Giblify.
Hmm.
And Giblify, many have heard of it. If you've never heard of it, it's Giblify, Givelify.
Hmm.
Giblify allows a person to contribute to your church, even if your church doesn't do online giving.
Hmm.
If your ministry is considered a church, registered as a church, it is
Hmm.
in Giblify's database. So I can be watching your ministry online, and you don't have online giving available yet at your church, but I can scroll through Giblify, and I really like your church, and I can find your church, select it, identify how much I want to give, and it will
Hmm.
mail a check to that church.
Wow.
Yes,
That part I did not know.
it will mail a check
I
to the
did not
church.
know that.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So
Wow.
whether you aren't giving or having online giving,
Okay.
you have it just by virtue of you being a church through Givelify.
Okay.
Yeah. Now there are some benefits to Givelify if you have, and Givelify is free to create
Hmm.
an account. It does allow you to do direct deposit of the contributions if you create a
Uh-huh.
free account. And when I say free, it's free on the side of the church. They do, just like with any vendor, for every contribution, there's a certain percentage that is
Right.
taken from that
Right.
contribution. That's how they make their money before
Hmm.
the rest of it gets to the church. But it's a
Hmm.
small percentage. And so being a part of the debate about not getting the church, not getting all of the money, and in that conversation, I take the side of, well, that's, if
Hmm.
you get $98 out of 100 that was given, and 98 comes after the fee, that's likely $98 that you wouldn't have received,
There you
because
go.
from a person who's in two states over
There you
wouldn't
go.
have mailed a check to the church like
Right.
me.
Right.
Giving
Right.
online is paramount for me. So,
Right. Right. Right.
but Givelify is a great way to get started if you
Okay.
aren't. Yep. Mhm. Yep. And then, of
Okay.
course, Cash App is another.
Hmm.
Um, the good thing I like about Givelify and PayPal, and there are a few others, is on the back end, it gives you reports of the contributions, more easy to
Better than
find.
Cash App.
Yeah, better than
Okay.
Cash App. Yeah, but Cash App, I mean, many people have Cash App and they use
Right.
it. So
Right.
that's another, I would say, a secondary option to provide.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So what I was going to say is during the height of the pandemic, when Dad and Sean and I would be sitting on the couch church hopping,
Hmm.
and even not just on Sunday, but sometimes during the week when churches would go live for their Bible studies. And, I might be on Facebook doing something else, and I would see, oh, so and so's church is on. I get a
Hmm.
notification. I watch. may not stay the whole time,
Mhm.
but I'd watch and I'd see the Cash App at the bottom of the screen,
Mhm.
and I'd send them something.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I've done that any number of times for churches, not even in my city,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
churches in our organization. Um, that I'd see, on Facebook as they were broadcasting their services, and I would just send them something because they asked, because it
Mhm.
was on there, and because we had it to give,
Sure.
and so that kind of backs up what you were saying about the offering going up,
Mhm. Mhm.
increasing
Mhm.
during the pandemic because of online giving. Not only, it went the percentage of people who gave online increased, but also the amount that the churches were taking in
Mhm.
increased for many churches. That may not be the case, I'm sure, for every church, but it is worth mentioning. And perhaps there are things you can do to beef up the chance that someone would contribute to your ministry, even if they're not a part of your ministry.
Certainly. And one way to do that, if your church is on Facebook or YouTube or any other platform,
Hmm.
is whatever your giving options are, is to put a link or have the link or the Giblify or Cash App
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
put into the chat. So,
Hmm.
whatever the Cash App is, dollar sign, whatever that is, and just make it readily visible. So as people are engaged in the worship service, then they can know what that
Uh-huh.
is, even around the times when it's mentioned in the worship service.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So speaking of social media,
Mhm.
how can these platforms be used for discipleship? Because in the Church of our Lord Jesus Christ, our presiding apostle, Apostle James I. Clark Jr.,
Mhm.
um, he has given us the theme of discipleship. And I forget what the exact phrase is, but the theme is discipleship, bringing souls to Christ. And that's the church's mission
Mhm.
anyway. But how are we using what we have, our gifts, our talents, our resources, um, to disciple men and women, boys and girls? And so we have these um, social media platforms. How can we use the Facebook, the YouTube, the Instagram for some? I'm not as big on that, but
Mhm.
there's a segment of our population, a certain demographic, that they love the gram. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
if you're not tapped into the different platforms that the people you're trying to reach are tapped into, you may be missing an opportunity for discipleship. So how can these platforms be used during worship for
Mhm.
discipleship,
Mhm.
and when worship is not happening
Mhm.
for discipleship?
Mhm.
So those are two different
Sure.
types. Right. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
And so with Facebook, and certainly with Facebook, but even so with YouTube, two important components that are the basics of using Facebook and YouTube. First, even before that, is making sure that you have an account
Hmm.
for Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Just
Hmm.
and even if you aren't using all of those platforms, if you are heavily on Facebook, just go ahead and create those accounts so that you can secure the name of what you want to be
Hmm.
called on those platforms. So when you
That
do
is
graduate,
right. Hmm.
you have those names already locked in, so no one
Good
else will
point.
have them.
Very good point.
So with Facebook, and all of them, the basics of how to interact start with commenting and sharing.
Hmm.
So one, engaging with people in the chat. So as you are, either if your service is live or if it's pre-recorded and is broadcast as if it is live, then having either one person, or if you have more than one person, the
Hmm.
great thing is they don't have to be at the church to participate in
Right. 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 Right.
responding to
Hmm.
comments in the
Hmm.
chat.
Hmm.
So the good thing about that is anyone can do it who is a part of your team, and then making those comments intentional, meaning if a
Mm,
person is in the chat and they are enjoying the worship service, respond to them individually, meaning
mhm.
say there or type in their name as a part of the response.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's a great way to
Yes.
make it very much
Yes. Mhm.
intentional and direct to those who are actually watching.
Mhm.
And there's data that suggests that many people who have become virtual members of churches did so because someone reached out to them or responded
Mhm.
specifically to them in the chat. And that can be done in the live moment or even after the
Mhm.
service is over.
Mhm.
Also putting in the chat the sermon title and the text and the
Mhm.
points. And many
Mhm.
people glean from that throughout
Mhm.
the week. And
Mhm.
then as a part of, and this goes back to the hybrid ministry, the language, since there is a simultaneous audience, the
Mhm.
language of which whoever is preaching or leading worship speaks has to
Mhm.
connect with both those in person and those who are online, meaning being able to let them know and speak, and your eye contact into the camera
Mhm.
is important
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they are a part of your congregation. But being able to say, place in the comment, let us know that you're watching, and also
Mhm.
share this broadcast,
Mhm.
because the more people share, the more the word gets
That's
spread
it.
and opportunities to walk and disciple with people as they connect based on you sharing the broadcast.
So,
Or
so what I hear you saying, Reverend Farmer, is that to use the phrase that the terms that we use um, in our vocation is that the pastors have to be talking to the roomies and the zoomies
at the same time.
at the same time.
Mhm. And
I
that even
know
goes
we're
into the preaching
accustomed to
moment.
preach. Say,
Yes.
say that
No,
again.
I was just gonna say that even extends to the preaching moment too.
Right,
S
right, right.
Mhm,
Yeah, yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Okay. And something else I heard you say that I thought was interesting is you talked about your virtual members.
Mhm, mhm,
Now, in the Pentecostal apostolic tradition, we may not be that comfortable
mhm,
with
mhm,
the concept, with the even the thought of virtual members, members who may not ever come through our doors.
mhm, mhm,
But this space has created um, something new for us in terms of, there may be members who, maybe people who say, I don't know if I want to come back to church. And I know we got the scriptures, and I know, the Bible says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. And, we got good reason to want our people, our members to come back into our doors.
mhm.
But the truth is, some may not, but they may be comfortable just being a virtual member.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to deal with that?
Mhm, mhm.
And how
Yeah.
are you going to disciple those people? That's new.
That's
That's a
new.
new concept now.
Yes. Yeah, it
That's a new
is.
concept. Can you disciple those members? How are you going to meet their needs for discipleship? Not just ministering salvation to them, but helping them to grow spiritually. You
Sure.
know, how are we going to disciple them? That's just something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something to think about as an individual church, as a denomination,
Mhm.
and I'm sure there have been conversations from the leadership of the church as it relates
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
how we are going to approach what virtual membership looks like. What will the
Mhm.
ordinances of the church look like? And
Oh,
that's a big conversation
yeah,
right
it's
now.
stuff we got to talk about.
Yeah.
Things that we have to think, because what we're doing now is we're not stepping outside of the bounds of Scripture.
Mhm.
Because we're going to stand on the Word of God and
Sure.
and follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, but we are reimagining what different constructs look like, and what the church looks like, and what ministry looks like, what discipleship looks like. we're having to reimagine how all of these things look, because our circumstances have changed. I know the word of God don't change, but our circumstances
Right.
have changed,
Exactly.
and different
Exactly.
variables have changed. And so if you don't change, you may find yourself not having because people, this is my experience, they're going to go where the needs are
Needs are
being
being
met.
met. That's where they're going to go. And whether that's in person or online.
Right.
And
Right.
so why not be the church that
Right.
can think through and work to support all of those, no matter how they interact and connect with the
Right.
church? Because I believe that if you meet their people's needs where they are, then where you meet them will ultimately get
Mhm.
them to the place
I
of
do.
worship.
I
And
do
so
too. I
I'm
do
a firm
too.
believer in
Yeah.
that, because
I do too.
I've
Mhm.
seen it happen in even in this
Mhm.
space, how people who never would have gone to church.
Mhm.
And another thing about church too, that this space provides, it provides a place that a person doesn't encounter. And I know this doesn't happen in your church, but the invisible layer of judgment that many
Mm.
people have
Mm.
experienced in their
Mm.
previous church
Mm.
experiences that have
Mm.
caused them not to go
Mm.
to church, whether it's the
Yeah.
eyes looking them up and down,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whether it was the
Yeah.
usher that made them spit out the gum in
Mhm.
order to come into the worship space. All
Mhm.
those types of things, and many people's
Mhm.
their experiences have, in a sense, kept them into their own spaces. That now this opens the door for them
Right.
to again
Right.
come back to what their experiences previously
Mhm.
may have prohibited or
Mhm.
caused judgment as it relates to their experience in that space.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
And one other benefit I see, and we can, move to our closing, is that, um, when we're virtual, we don't have the boundaries. We don't have the physical
Mhm,
boundaries.
mhm, mhm,
So, you're from the great state of Missouri, the show me state.
mhm, mhm.
We could potentially have members from Missouri who see our broadcast on Facebook or on YouTube and say, you know
Sure.
what? I like that church. I like this bishop. I like that pastor, this elder. I like the way they do worship. That sermon touched me.
Mhm, mhm.
And, the way they talk to me in the comments, or invite, or, just ask me uh, some things about myself that made me feel welcome.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so you can potentially attract members from all over the world,
Sure, sure.
because you don't have those limitations when you're virtual. Just a
Exactly.
thought.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then going to the next level of connecting and remaining connected with
Right.
people even after the worship service is to find means by which to gather information from
Mhm.
the persons or the people who are watching online.
Right.
And that can be done with a basic type of form. As we know in our line of work,
Uh-huh.
Google has a device called a Google form where a person can put in their name, even if this is their first time visiting or watching, putting their name and email address, maybe phone number, and identify how they watched or how they found out about the service. And
Mhm.
then also using a form for people to join the church or to request prayer. And even if it's not a form, um, at the basic level, just provide an
Uh-huh.
email address where you can
Right.
email us
Right.
and send your information. So that way we know that you're watching, or if you would like to request prayer or receive salvation or join the church, you can send an email.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
certainly a form helps to gather information as well. But have a way, in addition to them contacting or commenting in the chat, is
Mhm.
gathering their contact information. So thereafter, you have a way to send them your newsletter or send them
Right.
inspirational messages or
Right.
things of that
Right.
nature, or invite them to new member orientation
Mhm.
on Zoom, those types of things to stay
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
remain connected with them.
Okay.
Hmm.
That sounds good. Well, um, this has been Phenomenal. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we close out? I just want to thank you for
Certainly.
taking the time to share with us. Um, we would have preferred to have you in person, and
Yeah.
I know that we'll get you in person as our schedules and time permits. Um, but is there anything else you wanted to mention or that you thought would be noteworthy for this session before we close out?
Certainly. One thing I would like to mention, especially as ministries are looking to acquire devices, make sure that you implore, if you know someone who's already doing what you want to do, connect
Mhm,
with them and
mhm,
maybe go on a tour or visit their ministry to see what it is that they're doing and how they got to the place of where they are as far as their ministry, and then use that as a way to then build the framework for where your ministry want what where you would like for it to go, so that
mhm.
way you're getting good information and well advised information to help along the way in developing the hybrid ministry of your church. And so with that being said, I believe that this has been a great start, and we look forward to helping and supporting ministries at an even higher level. As the old song says, every round goes
Every round
higher
goes
and higher.
higher and higher.
So we'll
So,
just keep going higher.
so Reverend Farmer, before you leave, can you tell the saints of God how they can follow you on your social media platforms?
Certainly. So I am on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at Farmer Tech Group. And my website is farmertechgroup.com. And you can
Okay.
reach me there via email if you need to connect with me in any way.
Okay. That
Yes.
sounds great. The Farmer Tech Group. Thank you, Reverend Timothy B. Farmer, for joining us today for this Region 7 Leadership Training Institute, our hybrid, our virtual series, that is. And we look forward to collaborating with you um, in the future. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Cotton. And it
All
has
right.
been a pleasure.
All right.
All right. God
Bye
bless.
bye. Hmm.